Okay, 9 o'clock.
We don't have Supervisor Compton with us. We don't anticipate that she's going to be able to join us this morning, but we don't yet have
Vice Chair
Miss Bright
Bright.
yet either. Yeah, Miss Bright is still not yet in.
So we do have a quorum, but we do not have the chair or the vice chair yet.
Or the prior chair either.
Alyssa, have you texted Vice Chair Bright?
Where we are right now.
Okay. Procedurally, Jeff, when you have both the vice chair and the chair out, how do you determine who runs the meeting?
I'm not exactly sure because I've never seen it happen. I think we would have to have the board appoint someone to run the meeting. I think that would work fine.
We have plenty of past chairs, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
I
perhaps
think-
look to the chair in the past. And
I think John Hammond was a past chair, weren't you?
Many years ago, Jan.
Yeah, I think I was maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
while.
we have Bruce, Jan, John, Debbie. We're in good shape.
yep.
Ed.
Don't yet see her coming in.
Let's stage a takeover.
I think perhaps probably the best way to start then would be to have one of the present board members make a nomination for someone to lead the meeting today and get a second and a vote.
Okay, Jan Marks, I'd like to nominate Bruce Gibson to chair the meeting today.
Here, I should have been quiet.
Second that.
And this is Ed Woggy. I'll second that. If we
Okay,
need to.
Alyssa, I would suggest you just take public comment on that.
Okay. Do we need to actually take a vote on that as well?
Yep.
Okay. So the motion, who wants to call for public comment? You want me to?
Yes, please.
Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this particular motion to nominate Bruce Gibson as the chair for this particular meeting? I do not have any members of the public that have their hand up that wish to speak on this item. Okay, so the motion was made by Ms. Marks. It was seconded by,
Woggy,
thank you, Ms. Arnold.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Darrows is not present either. Mr. Gibson,
Okay,
Mr. Hammond, Ms. Ortiz-Legg,
Yes.
Ms. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Paulding,
Yes.
Mr. Pashong is absent. Ms. Bright is also absent. Mr. Woggy,
yes.
thank you. Ms. Marks,
yes.
vote is unanimous.
all right. Thanks.
Alyssa, did you call?
Yeah, we're
Director
communicating with Ms. Bright. She's having some trouble accessing the link.
Did you roll call Director Ford?
We haven't taken roll call yet.
Okay. On the
Yeah.
vote.
Agenda looks like flag salute. If you would all join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, Ms. Roslin, if you would conduct a roll.
Yes. Ms. Arnold.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Compton is absent. Mr. Daras is absent. Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr.
Here.
Hammond,
I here.
Ms. Marks,
Here.
Ms. Ortiz-Legg,
Here.
Ms. Ford on behalf of Mr. Heading.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Paulding,
Here.
Mr. Pashong is absent. Ms. Bright is currently absent, but she will be here. Mr. Wagi,
Yes, here.
thank you.
All right, so the first item on our agenda is the consideration of a resolution to legalize what we're doing here. Continue our virtual meeting. Mr. Minery, you have any comment on that? It's our standard action in this matter.
Standard action, standard procedure for now. Your board has done this a number of times, so I would suggest public comment and then bring it back to the board.
We'll open it to public comment. Alyssa, do we have anybody wishing to comment?
We do have a member of the public. Oh, that's Ms. Bright. Hold on one sec. Let's bring Ms. Bright in. Let's see. It's taking a minute for Zoom to bring her over. I do have a member of the public that wishes to speak specifically on this item. So give me
Why don't we
one
go ahead and take that comment while you're working on it, Karen there.
Okay. Jared McLeod, you may unmute your mic and speak.
Hello, good morning, Jared McLeod, Friends of Oceano Dunes. We would like to encourage the APCD board to continue with a hybrid virtual format to allow members of the public the opportunity to participate even when the board possibly moves back into in-person meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cloud. Any other public comment?
There are no other members of the public that wish to speak on this item.
Let's go ahead, while we're on this item, go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, Hammond would like to make a motion to approve the resolution to continue virtual meetings.
Thank you. Have a second?
Debbie.
Ed Woggy, second.
Take Woggy's second, I heard. Any
Okay.
further discussion? If not, Alyssa, then a roll call, please.
Ms. Arnold,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Ms. Marks,
Yes.
Ms. Ortiz-Legg,
Yes.
Ms. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Paulding. Mr. Paulding,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Bright,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Wagi
Yes.
and Mr. Hammond.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous.
All right. I will turn the virtual gavel over to our esteemed vice chair at this point.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened here, but anyway, I'm glad to be with you all. So then we'll move now then to, looks like the consent agenda. Are there any questions from the board on any of these items, B1 through B5? Okay, hearing none. Any comments from the public regarding this consent agenda?
I do not have any members of the public that wish to speak on the consent agenda.
Thank you very much. If there is no discussion from this board, then I would entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Approval of consent.
Second,
Gibson?
it's by Ortiz-Legg.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second. May we have
Roll call.
a roll call, please?
Yep. Ms. Arnold,
Yes.
Mr. Hammond. Mr. Hammond,
Aye, you hear
thank
me?
you. Yep, gotcha. Ms. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Paulding,
Yes.
Ms. Bright,
Yes.
Mr. Wagi,
Yes.
Ms. Ortiz-Legg,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Ms. Marks.
I was going to say, I'm still on the APCD board.
So
and
sorry.
So it's still
Ms. Marks?
Yes.
Thank you. The vote is unanimous with Ms. Marks's vote.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now will move to public comment period for any members of the public that wish to address this board on matters other than items addressed in this particular agenda. Do we have any?
We do have a member of the public that wishes, two members of the public that wish to speak.
Very
The
good.
first to speak is going to be Chris, and I always mispronounce the last name. I apologize. Chris Waregi.
Yes, no worries. Thank you. It's Harigi. Again,
Hardy.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that. My name is Chris Harigi. I'm a board member for Friends of Oceana Dunes and a 33-year resident of South County. I lived in both the Mesa area and have lived in Napomo, the town of Napomo. You know, the metric of the stipulated order abatement is to reduce the number of violations of the state PM standard. Regardless of the statistical gymnastics presented by APCD's Carl Tupper at last week's hearing board meeting, that PM10 violation metric has not been reduced. It has increased. The windiest time in South County is spring, and the windiest months that we all know are April, May, and June. And looking at the PM10 violation data from the APCD CDF monitoring station for these months, from 2014 through 2022, the most violations of the state PM standard has occurred this year, and the month is not even over with. A total of 40 violations has occurred, and we still have days to go in June. And those violations have occurred with more than 400 acres of the dunes covered with vegetation and fencing at the direction of APCD. Despite what the APCD and the SAG claim, the mitigations are doing nothing. The PM10 on the Mesa has nothing to do with OHV recreation. Nonetheless, the APCD has somehow convinced state parks that it can stop the wind from blowing, and in so, state parks is chasing its tail at the public's expense. Again, I appreciate allowing me to speak, and that's it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. We do have one more member of the public that wishes to speak. That member is going to be Jared McLeod. You may unmute yourself and speak.
Good morning, APCD board. My name is Jared McLeod, Vice President, Friends of Oceana Dunes. As a Friends board member, I am extremely frustrated over the continued lies and stall tactics from the APCD. The latest example is the speciation data the APCD took in 2020 and has done nothing with it. It has now been 2 years. When Dr. Lynn Russell was asked to review it in light of her analysis for Scripps, she thought it complemented her data. Then the APCD said the data is somehow confidential and could not be used. Not sure how a public agency can claim air data captured with tax dollars is confidential. Carl Tupper said at the OHV Commission meeting on December 9th that he was collecting samples from the CDF station on the Mesa, having the samples analyzed for mineral dust content, just like what Scripps had done. When asked when he would have the report for that work, he said spring 2022. Where is it? This is exactly what the APCD did with the silica. They had data and studies they withheld from the public until forced to do so. Friends of Oceana Dunes has hired outside experts to do a real review of the SAG and DRI reports, and here are some brief findings and comments. SAG report. In summary, in its memo, SAG based the emissions reduction target on an unprecedented and first ever modeling system that has not been validated and is not a standard method used by USP, EPA, and other agencies. It predicts downwind PM10 concentrations with an accuracy of, at best, plus 53%, minus 36%. It appears to overpredict the anticipated benefit of emissions reductions by a factor of at least 3 to more than 50 times. It could be using emissions estimates from the dunes that are much too large, and it ignores the natural variability of vegetation cover. It also ignores the uncertainties except for the difference in vegetation cover between 1939 and 1966. This is a 0.2% difference. The DRI report. In summary, although the study supported differences in pie swirl emissivity for 2020 versus 2019, there are strong indications that the reported pie swirl emissivity does not actually represent real-world PM10 emissions and concentrations. The study purports to show that PM10 concentrations, when normalized, decrease with the decrease in OHV, but there are serious questions about whether the normalization used is appropriate or leads to correct conclusions. Most importantly, PM10 concentrated at CDF does not support the conclusion that OHV riding is the primary contributor of PM10 concentrations downwind of the SVRA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jared. I do not have any other members of the public that wish to speak.
Thank you. Appreciate that information. It looks then now that we will move on to the APCO's report.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Bright. Gary Willey, Air Pollution Control Officer. Looks like today we might have a very short meeting. Basically, we don't have any new topics today, but I do have some issues on the APCO report that I'll brief you on. Our COVID-19 response, we've been hit with some sicknesses during this current wave, but luckily we've had no one seriously ill, and we've had no office outbreaks or loss of function during the pandemic at all. So we've been blessed with that. As we passed that resolution before, we still recommend remote meetings until they're not allowed by the governor's proclamation. And we will do our best to come up with a hybrid setup, because we do realize that the public and some board members and air quality is enhanced by not having people travel long distances in cars in order to get somewhere to attend these meetings. When our board agendas are routine, I also suggest that the executive committee consider canceling their meetings as determined by the board chair until the board meets physically in person. There's some issues with getting special meetings set up to have remote executive meetings that we discussed previously. A little bit update with our grant programs. At the November board meeting, that your board accepted the year four farmer allocation of just over $1.75 million. I'm pleased to report that staff has fully awarded all of this year's funding very quickly. The funding covers up to 65% of eligible purchases for farm equipment, engine-powered farm equipment. We have 17 projects in our county, 16 different businesses, from Napomo in the south, to San Miguel in the north, and east to Shannon. It's very well distributed. The grant staff have done an excellent job. And we're excited to announce that our first all-electric tractor is part of that grant program for the Paso Robles area. We will continue to award agricultural and off-road replacement projects with our Carl Moyer funding. And we have about $200K remaining in that. It was previously authorized by your board. So it's in the pool. We could see more farm equipment being replaced and get those needed emission reductions out there. District staff have worked with the local fire agencies to facilitate 3 structure and 4 vehicle training burns. In fact, we even donated our old monitoring station to CAL FIRE. We had it located near a CAL FIRE area, and they can use it for their arson training course. And so that saves us some money from having to dispose of it, and CAL FIRE gets to train their staff on very important safety issues with burning mobile trailers like that. And all the hazardous materials are removed beforehand. The VESTA surveys are done. Anyway, CAL FIRE has burned a total of 2,400 acres. As of May 25th, State Parks has burned 1,003 large piles of brush and 18.75 acres of brush in Montana de Oro for the burn season. Let's go to, I'll talk about the Central Coast carbon sequestration. I've got a dry mouth this morning for some reason. The Central Coast carbon sequestration sequestration webinar series. Since 2020, staff have been part of a regional GHG collaboration group with members of the SLO, Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. The focus of the group was to help jurisdictions meet state mandated GHG requirements for land use development using the most cost-effective measures. Over the last 2 years, the group has interviewed witnesses and researched how local carbon, I can't get that word out today, sequestration projects and offset projects can help. Our jurisdictions met with the state GHG reduction targets, meet their state GHG reduction targets and climate action plans, and how during the CEQA process, new development can use these projects to mitigate their GHG impacts. The result of this was a 5-part weekly webinar series that was held during April and May entitled Balance Carbon Getting Carbon Neutrality Through Sequestration and Offsets. We had 300 speakers registration slots filled up prior to this first session. Speakers were educated on our audience on carbon markets with strong focus on local and regional natural and working land projects. District staff held 2 of the sessions or led 2 of the sessions. The sessions recording materials are available on our website. Additionally, the State Air Resources Board also utilized that series in their scoping plan. So good job by that group that we're a part of, trying to get some locally enhanced mitigations to solve our land use requirements under the state GHG requirements. And finally, item B5 that you approved earlier is a study to quantify the emission reduction and carbon sequestration potential for alternative wood waste burning projects. This was a great score on our part. Andy Mutziker is our lead on this, and he did a great job of getting this grant money so that we can help run this project to utilize wood waste burning techniques to reduce GHG emissions, and it also provides this biochar, which can be used as a soil enhancement. So very excited to get that money available and to be able to direct the program. So with that money, we'll be directing various contractors to do the projects to test the emission reductions and the carbon sequestration potential. So very excited with that. And we're the catalyst to get that done. And locally, we have a lot of wood waste burning projects that could utilize this. If we can get the credits and utilize them locally for land use development, it'll be a great win for the district and the county and the state, and then worldwide if we can get this done. So very excited about that. Lastly, we'll give you the Oceano Dunes update. Last Friday, we held a hearing board meeting to review the stipulated order of abatement. The hearing was set by the hearing board itself last fall when they were considering requiring modifications to the order. State Parks and the district had planned to propose some stipulated modifications that would clarify the order. But prior to the meeting, we determined it was best to seek changes in the fall as more of our data is examined. So as an alternative to proposing any modifications to the order, we developed a joint statement to address our current status of the mitigations and possible future modifications to the order. Staff, State Parks, and the Scientific Advisory Group, as well as the Air Resources Board, all presented during the hearing. The presentation showed that over the last 4 years, we have seen significant year-over-year reductions. We continue to see further reductions as plan of mitigation matures. The new foredunes evolve and further areas are treated. Yeah, and we are still seeing PM10 violations, that's for sure, but they are much lower than we have been under the same wind conditions. This is striking when you consider this is the windiest year since Diablo Canyon has kept records in 1976. Anybody local fisherman or outside person will testify to that this is by far the windiest year. Given that, when we look at the wind event days that cause violations that are when it's blowing directly from the ocean over the dunes, we've seen a 33.5% improvement due to the mitigations. This aligns well with the model prediction of 36.8%. The model prediction assumes that the vegetation has already grown to the mature state. So given that it's not there yet, we're very happy with the trends, and quite frankly, so were the hearing board and the Mesa residents as well. You can see by their not coming to this meeting and asking for more reductions. They're satisfied with the process of how it's working. Another thing that collaborates well with that is the trends in the hours above 300 micrograms per meter cubed. Those have gone way down, even though the winds are much higher this year. So we're seeing some good results in a very windy year. Well, I talked about that. So far, this is the windiest spring and summer since we've been tracking it. And you'll see a full presentation in our air quality report in the fall. The joint statement that that's also available online recommended the hearing board wait to the fall, and the hearing board agreed and didn't take any action until the fall meeting in October. During the fall, I do intend to apply to modify the order, which would at a minimum extend the jurisdiction period until probably 2026 to allow the treatments to mature and additional time to develop new treatments if needed. That joint statement, like I said before, the presentations can all be found on our website, along with a YouTube link where you can watch the hearing. It's slightly under 2 hours. You can fast forward on YouTube and go to different presentations if you want. It's an excellent method of getting up to date on this process. Tomorrow we have a meeting with in Oceana with the Scientific Advisory Group. We try to meet twice a year in person out there, and state parks, to discuss this year's mitigation plan that's being developed and will be workshopped in the fall, the future of the adaptive management process, and long-term monitoring. Additionally, we'll be touring the Oceano Dunes to get a firsthand view of how the mitigations are working. And with that, my APCO's report is complete.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Hammond? Can't hear you.
Still-
I'm not sure.
Still muted,
Sure.
John.
Okay, I was just gonna say, it looks like Jimmy and Debbie and Bruce were in line there too. So a real quick question, Gary, there was an allegation that we were not releasing data from our equipment out there on the dunes. Is there a reason why we don't make that public, or
No.
what's behind that?
All our data is public. We just haven't had time to do the analysis yet. So when anybody says that anything we produce is being held back, that's wrong. All I have to do is make a public information request and receive the data. So, you know, we're working with state parks and the Scientific Advisory Group to analyze the data. There's only so many hours in the day and so much time to develop things. So we're working on it, but the data is available. And
Okay.
so, you know, it pains me when people accuse us of not providing the data. If there's data available, it's public, made with public funds, it's available.
Very good. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, so I am not able to see all the hands at once, so I'm just going to go down the participant list. So first on the list is Jimmy Paulding.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say, Gary, you know, great job on just managing staff and the organization in this process, especially related to the Oceano Dunes and all the grant funds that we've been able to acquire. Good work. I also want to just recognize the 33.5% improvement on dust emissions due to mitigations. I mean, that is a substantial improvement and really excited to see that. My question relates to the comment you made regarding extending the timeline for the stipulated order of abatement and the reduction target to 2026. In addition to that, that would be obviously your future recommendation, as mentioned. Would you be looking at reducing that from 50% down to something else?
Well, the goal is to achieve the state standard, but we all know that there's a natural background portion that we'll never always do it. And some wind events, dunes will move whether or not you destabilize them with vehicles or not. It's just they move a lot more. So we're still struggling to find that endpoint. The 50% was just the initial target that we do. We haven't changed that yet. That actually does not require, the initial target is under my purview, but the hearing board can override that. And so we need to come up with a metric that's different than just meeting the state standard, because we know that won't occur even if we didn't have any writing. There will be some violations. It's just the number will be much less and the magnitude much less. So we're working on that, and we're going to be talking about that during the meetings this time. But at this point, we're still focusing on that initial target until we have something else, and that would have to occur under the hearing birds purview. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Next, Debbie Arnold, please.
Thank you, Karen. Gary, I just had a couple questions. You were talking about the hearing board activity this year, and I was wondering, I didn't see it in our budget that we're going to talk about later, but do we fund the hearing board out of the APCD budget, or does that money for their existence come from somewhere else?
We currently fund that under the APCD's budget, running the hearing board. Always, not just currently, but there are some mechanisms to get some cost recovery from the state on it. We still haven't, we have some issues with that right now of getting full cost recovery on running the hearing board. But, it's within our budget, and, it's unfortunate that it takes away money from other projects that we could be doing out there, other grant type projects that we can utilize these funds for, or even fee reductions from to our existing sources. But yes, we do bear that brunt, most of the brunt of running that.
Thank you. I didn't know. So maybe when we get to budget, then I'll ask you to, or I'll ask another question about where exactly does it fit in? But anyway, my other question, the speakers, and then you alluded to the spring winds being so high, and I see the chart was sent to me showing that this spring so far has had quite a few more violations than it looks like. The chart that I'm seeing, it only goes back to 2014. But anyway, that we had a lot of PM10 standard violations, way more than the average this year. So my question then was, our model, the only input in our model is mineral dust, right? That we put into the model. We don't do sea salt, and we don't do farm dust and all that. Our model is just, the input is what we're calling mineral dust, correct?
It's what the state defines as particulate matter on their measuring methodology. So the whole thing is kind of misunderstood. And I don't know if it's, what the reasons are for that, but we have no ability to change the monitoring and what the state calls PM10. It's just what shows up on the monitor. Its exact constituents vary. The percentages are different, but we do know that just to the north and just to the south, we don't have violations of the standard very frequently. So it's only when we align up over the areas that are ridden upon that we see these problems with the PM10 monitors. And still, the state or the federal government changes what they define as particulate matter. That's what we enforce, and that's what the PM10 standards protect against. The epidemiological studies that were done to develop those standards. So it's really something that we can't even, it doesn't even matter what the constituents are. It's not happening to the north. It's not happening to the south. It's just happening, we got it bracketed monitors on both sides. So we do know that we're only measuring the violations of when the wind is blowing from the ocean over the sand dunes. If it's salt, it would be salt to the north. It would be salt to the south. It's not. The reductions are so much, or the emissions are so much higher on either side of the riding area that are picked up on these monitors and it's only when we're blowing out from the ocean and the wind blows to the south even higher than over the our Oso Flaco area than over the riding area. So we would expect that if it was sea salt or any other thing, that we would pick it up on those other monitors. So the exact constituents really don't matter. And we have no ability to, if it's pieces of plastic or other things that are on that surface over the riding area, it would be pretty much impossible to just have it right there. So it's kind of running down a rabbit hole when we chase that one.
Okay, but I guess all in all, what I was asking, and when people say, yeah, what are you talking about PM10? That our model assumes that that 100% of the PM10 we're measuring, the input to our model is mineral dust.
No, it's not 100% mineral dust. So there are other pieces, there are other particulates in the air besides mineral dust. So
That go into our model though, that we are using in the model.
yeah, the model uses various factors, and the primary thing is this pi swirl device that measures the emissivity of the sand on the surface. So it's that beach sand material, whatever's in that sand, whatever particles are in that sand is showing up on the monitors that the pi swirl measures, and that's what's used to input into the model.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up for me. That's all I had. And I'll ask my other question, or I'll ask again when we get to budget where we see the funding for the hearing board.
Very
Thank
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Arnold. The next on the list, and actually the last that I see, is Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start with a comment. It's long been established that the source of the exceedances is dust coming off the riding area. That goes back, including speciation studies, back to the phase 2 study, and it's been clearly confirmed. But Gary, my question really is, I would expect, as you report the reduction in the amount of dust being generated off the dunes and measured downwind, that as that reduction climbs, we should see a reduction of the number of violations of Rule 1001. And I was hoping that when you do report on any activities in the dunes, that you include a report of the number of violations of Rule 1001. And if indeed these mitigation measures are getting at the source of the problem, we should be seeing the number of violations go down even as the number of wind days goes up. And are we seeing that?
We are seeing that when you compare wind event days. We are seeing a reduction in that, and that report will be out in the fall, and we'll do a presentation to your board at that point.
I think that that's an important, extremely important piece of information, whether it shows up as a graph or whatever, because that's really the essence of it. And I think in the fall it would be also useful to review exactly what the action in front of the hearing board is right now. It was filed as a nuisance and the need to abate a nuisance. That is somewhat different. In fact, it's distinctly different from an action that could be brought to enforce Rule 1001. That would be a different kind of action. And I think understanding the difference between those two things would be an important discussion when we get to the fall report, because even if the hearing board declares this particular action before them completed, there is still the question of whether this emission source is violating a rule of this district. So I don't know if you have any comment on that right now, but I think that that's extremely important for members of this board to understand.
Yes, agreed. We are, whatever the hearing board action on the SOA does, it is designed to reduce violations of Rule 1001 as well, and it will cut. It's just the process.
Could I cut in there? I don't recall that in the SOA. I don't recall in the SOA Rule 1001 is even mentioned at all. There
is a slight mention of it, and during the petition itself that was filed by former Director Larry Allen, it was for both a nuisance and for Rule 1001. The stipulated order that we agreed to with state parks with the hearing board process was even listed tighter than that. It was, come up with the meeting the state standard, which we know that that given the natural state, we will have some violations. They just won't be as often and won't be as large. So that's a difficult task to come up with, and it's a reason why we got bogged down with Rule 1001. We can't quite get a handle on it until you're into the process, until it evolves and the mitigations are in place and we start taking measurements. So this adaptive management process itself will help solve the Rule 1001 issue. In fact, the way it's listed right now, it's even tighter than Rule 1001, meeting the state standard. So it's the most complicated process you can run. I think it works very well. It's just very labor intensive and very and very complicated.
But again, for the purposes of this board, I think it's really important to emphasize that enforcement of Rule 1001 is the standard to which this board, seeks compliance with activities that create dust off the dunes.
Agreed.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the board, have we any public comment regarding this item?
I do have one member of the public that wishes to speak.
Thank you.
Yep. Jared McLeod would like to speak on this topic.
Yeah, this is Jared McLeod, Friends of Oceana Dunes. I have a question for Control Officer Willie. Does the computer modeling assume 100% dust? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Those were the only public speakers I had on this particular item.
Thank you. Is it appropriate to answer that question now? Or is that something
we are under no obligation to answer the questions in a meeting? So they can make public comment. If the board directs me to answer the question, then that's what we'll do.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna say, since we had a question, kind of seems to me slightly similar from Board Member Arnold, I believe. Does this board think that we should have that question answered to kind of clarify matters?
Hammond agreed.
I think it should be answered. I mean, it's just a straight up question, a yes or no.
Can you repeat the exact wording of the question again?
Hold on one sec. Let me allow him to speak again. Jared, can you please re-ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Control Officer Willie, my question was, does the computer modeling assume 100% dust?
Computer modeling assumes 100% of dust, yes, but with the models of what's in the dust, of course, is measured by a dust tracking device. So yes, it does.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you handling that. So now we'll move on to board business. Item C1, hearing to adopt the proposed changes to the district fees, please.
Okay. Give me 1 second to get the presentation up.
Thank you.
Dora Drexler, our engineering compliance manager, will be giving you this presentation. It's pretty much the same as you saw last meeting, but a shorter version. Dora?
Yes, good morning. This is Dora Drexler. I'll give Alyssa a second here.
There you go.
So today is we're going to be going over our Rule 302 schedule of fees, our proposed changes. And if you go to the next slide, please. So rather than go through a full long presentation, I kind of summarize this here. So this will be the second of 2 hearings for the proposed changes. There have been no changes to the rule or any any part of that since our previous hearing in May. We did notify all of our permit holders. We've received no comments from the public nor from any agency. The fee changes follow the fiscal plan. That is what they were based on. And our goal was to have a smooth permit fee increases over time. Our estimated revenue from those changes will be about $200,000. And that partially offsets the loss of revenue from the refinery. We'll be losing about $500,000 in permit fees. And that deficit will be made up by budget reserves. Alyssa, could you go on to the next one, please? So our recommendation is to adopt the proposed revisions to the District Rule 302 Schedule of Fees and to approve the resolution. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. I do have some additional slides if someone would like to review some of those.
I had a question really quick. Karen, may I? I'm fooling around with my hand. I can't tell if you can see my hand on my picture or not. My question was on page, well, it's 40 of 122 in our whole entire packet, but it talks about after 225 or starting in 2025, the annual consumer price index adjustment proposed after 2025. That sounds like just kind of an automatic. Is that what you were saying? We would have a more smooth ability to kind of keep up with or keep the fees up with the expenses. Is that what we're looking at, an automatic annual CPI adjustment on our fees?
Yes, as mentioned in our last meeting, so we have a number of other districts that have adopted a CPI portion to their rule. We have not done that. So the original 6% increase over a number of, few years in the beginning was to smooth that transition to a point that then we would further move forward with automatic CPI adjustments. Yes.
Yeah. Director Arnold, this was recommended by our fiscal subcommittee. So we were just following the fiscal plan that was adopted last November.
And I mean, that would be smoother for the agency, but I just feel like, especially now with our inflation kind of running at, or we're expected to be looking at high CPI, and we know that ebbs and flows. It's just that it's that vicious circle. We raise rates, inflation goes up because we're part of the cost of doing business, et cetera. And so anyway, that was all. I was just checking to see that I'm understanding it right. It would be automatic. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and this year's fee increase is going to be less than the CPI for the annual amount that's in there. So yeah, it's and this and your board is can always postpone those in the future should they feel that the CPI is too high and you don't want to pass that upon the fee payers. So
thank you.
Was there any more questions, Mr. Hammond?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I was waiting for Chair Bright to acknowledge, but Dora, I was not available for the last meeting. I was on the East Coast at the time, no internet. And so what I see here is a problem to me personally, that we're trying to do the job that we did before. And it all has to do with revenue in, puts out so much product, to the taxpayers. And I think, again, if we were just to use only the CPI instead of the 6% over time, we're still living within our means. What I'm really upset about, or not happy about, is that like we did it with the Morro Bay power plant. They actually were charged more, just like the Arroyo Grande Mesa group, more than really what they probably should have, but they were subsidizing everybody else, which is always a problem. And that's the rub that I have here, is that we're trying to do the same services by now catching up. And I think that's kind of the wrong thing to do. And to me, I would have probably asked for, instead of the 6% over time, and I can't remember because I sat on the committee when we did this back in November, a smaller increases. In other words, to live within the CPI index and generally increase, I think it's fair and reasonable that we stay level with inflation, and that's what's, I think everybody expects. But to have 6%, 6%, 6%, and then on top of that, you have other exponential formulas that are going to boost all kinds of other fees much more to try to, again, make up the delta difference between losing the Mesa revenue and still put out services that, again, we want to see. I'm just thinking, again, that, I don't really appreciate the exponential trying over time to keep where we are. And it might be that, it's APCD needs to shrink its services at this point with revenue in. In other words, you control the revenue, you control government, so to speak. But maybe some of the programs that we have, maybe we ought to rethink those and maybe not have to do those services now that we don't have as much money to produce. So that's just my comment to the board. I think, again, it's important that we stay and live within our means. That's what we do here in Paso Robles quite frequently. We say that quite often, that we can only do so much with what we have. And if we're trying to now add on a lot of extra cost to other people, and frankly, probably where they should have been in the first place. But the point is, such a high jump so fast, I think it's kind of the wrong thing to do. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. If we could though stay with questions at this point, I think that's where we are. So next on my list, I show Mr. Woggy.
Thank you very much. The question is, would the way this scheme works out, would this automatically come back to the board at some point to concur? Mr. Willie, you mentioned that the board could change it, but would this automatically come back to the board at some point, the way it's written?
The way it's written, it would not come back automatically. However, it would. You always have a chance to review it during our budget process, and so we will include that in every budget meeting. In which case, the first meeting, the board could simply direct us not to do that increase in that year. So that's the way it would work. You would see in the budget, and we would be doing our presentations that there's a proposed CPI fee increase. So you would see it and have that opportunity.
And there would be enough time from the time it was presented to the board to make that change then, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woggy. Then the last hand that I see raised on my list is Miss Ortiz-Lake.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Woggy, for asking that question. And Mr. Hammond, because you weren't here, I think it was important. I mean, I don't like this any more than anybody else, but looking at the records of the fact that we had not followed the suit of other counties that were continually incrementally adding cost over time, and we hadn't. Now, no good deed goes unpunished. I mean, the fact that we were, in a sense, subsidized by the P66 certainly doesn't help us at this point with the closure of it. I don't know, it's kind of trying to weigh this out. And, I would hope, Director Wiley, that if you found other ways to reduce some of the services and other fee inspection things in areas that have maybe been minimized, if we have less polluters such as Phillips 66, that we can find those cost savings. But if you could just speak to that one more time, as far as where we are in the history in relationship to our sister counties and agencies.
Yes. Dora has a graph that Dora, do you have that graph available to show? That we did in our fiscal plan in this year's proposed budget, reduced a senior staff position to make up about a third of the funding shortfall from the refinery. So it's not that we haven't made adjustments to reduce costs. We have. It's just traditionally in a lot of air districts, these big industrial sources will offset the cost to run the programs. It's unfortunate when they cease to exist, both from the local jobs and the economy and from the district's ability to run the program. So, we've reduced staff by 2.5 staff over the last 5 years. We run a tight program. I feel we're very cost effective. So, without doing putting the fees on the sources that are responsible for the costs to run a program, I'm required by, or we're required by law to adequately fund it by the Air Resources Board and by the state law. And if we don't, then we have to do a per capita fee with our jurisdictions that sit on the board. There's not a good way out of this, but California law does mandate that we run these programs and that we have the money to do so. So if we don't provide it from the sources that we regulate for that program regulates, then we have to offset that coming in with the jurisdiction's money. So the county would have to pony up so many dollars or $1 per person, and each city would have to do the same to meet that budget shortfall if we don't have the money to run the program. I do not like to raise fees. We have, we cut staff beforehand to try to get reserves up enough to try to solve this problem. We've been trying to wean ourselves from the power plant and the refinery for 15 years. And it's just really hard politically to adjust the fees along the way when you don't have to. And that's why this district has reduced staffing and built up reserves to meter this kind of shortfall in over a long period of time. As a fiscal conservative, I do not like raising fees.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I do show Mr. Hammond's hand. Do you have another question?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
What, I guess maybe to Dora, we have the 6% built in. What is going to be our actual CPI this year? Have we calculated that?
I think Kevin may have that information. Kevin, do you have that available?
Hi, Kevin Kaizuka, Fiscal and Administrative Division. I haven't calculated that yet. We're hoping that it's going to go down with all the measures that the Federal Reserve is taking with the interest rates. But I haven't done that yet. I think right now it's running around 6%.
Right. That's kind of what I was thinking too. So what I see here is the increases that are proposed are pretty much probably close to where we're going to be, but maybe not in years 2 and 3, further out. I mean, I've always agreed that we should have been on that CPI to stay level with, inflation and such. But then I also see that, the permit categories here that are 500%, 600% over, times of what they were currently increases. And I think is a little extreme also, Gary. I mean, is that Kevin, we kind of figured these numbers to try to, again, stay where we were. Is that why we came up with these percentages on these category fees?
We cannot raise an existing fee by more than 15% when you add them together. There are some fee categories for new programs that we have to run according to state law that are in there, but nobody can go over 15% a year for an existing permit fee.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Karen. That's all I had.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Arnold has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. It was part comment, so I was trying to respect your comments before to save your comments for later. But I had a question and a bit of a comment. So if I may, I'll just go ahead. So I'm looking at page 6 on this staff report, but it's about the agricultural and prescribed burning permit. So maybe Dora, I'm going to just ask for clarification of that little chart. And the chart, it says ag and prescribed burning permit. So I'm assuming that when you say less than 10 acres or 100 tons of material, you're talking 10 acres if you're doing a prescribed burn. And in other words, it goes by acreage, 10 acres, more than 10 acres, more than 100, more than 250. That's the prescribed burn part. And then the tons of material would be if you're just trying to burn limbs or something out.
Yeah, it's either or. That's correct. And
Okay.
The majority of our permits actually are in the less than 10 or 100 tons. If you look at the total number of agricultural burn permits that we issue every year, I would say 98% of them, the vast majority, are in that lowest fee category.
Correct. And I was just clarifying because I just wanted to be sure that wasn't changing. It's the way. So then what I just want to say to my colleagues here on the board. So now we're talking about the so many smaller family farms and ranches here in the county. And if you're prescribed burning, which a sizable amount, like if we go to the bottom of the chart, more than 250 acres, we're raising a fee. Here's what I guess is worrisome to me. These are folks that a lot of them have been working hard in this county, paying property taxes in this county, and continuing, the ability to be able to continue the ability to produce agriculturally in a county like ours is difficult anyway. But now they're hit with all kinds of things, and especially the fuel prices going up, the drought that just lingers, and on. And to me, it starts to get into principle. When you're doing prescribed burn, I feel like that's more of a service to the county than a service to the property owner. It's a much needed, fire fuel management, all the way through, but especially when you get up into the bigger numbers. So we're asking them to pay $110 more than their $250 charge that they would have otherwise. And even going back to the smaller people, and I'll say personally, this would be me, the 100 tons of material. But again, it's time consuming. It's a lot of work to keep your place cleaned up and that's when I'm just talking about fire fuel now. This drought has created a lot of fire fuel that hits the ground, and for your landowners to take time out of their production agriculture and go and kind of continually clean it up, they need a permit, they get permits, but raising their fee, doubling their fees, and we can say, well, $50 to $100, no big deal. But I'm just saying it's yet another, we're killing people with 1,000 cuts here, and everything's going up. The ability to produce is going down due to things out of our control, such as weather. And so I'm just throwing that out there on behalf of every, person in production agriculture in this county. I think that would have been something we should have left alone.
Can I respond to that just real quickly? I just wanted to share that the majority of prescribed burning in our county is actually performed with CAL FIRE and other agencies, and we do not charge for any of those burns. In addition, hazard reduction burns are free as well. So if there's a serious hazard that's declared, on a property, we do not charge for that. And as I said, the majority of burning done by CAL FIRE, which often is in conjunction with a landowner, we do not charge for those as well. It's as I said, there's very few agriculturalists that actually do prescribed burning on their own, and those are just, I'd say, a handful, maybe 3 a year. I think 3 or 4 a year, possibly.
And I appreciate that, Dora. And I know this is not your fault. You're looking for places how that you can enhance revenue. I'm just saying that I just want everyone to be aware that the continual raising of fees, especially for services that to me are more, the gain is a benefit to the entire county, and it takes a lot of volunteer hours and a lot of work to get the actual work done, and then just a little bit of a sting when fees, go up on that.
Dora, I have a question. Are there any grant funding available? I think, I don't know, Fire Safe Council grants for people to cover the cost of these permits, should they, be required for a specific burn. I know we don't have very many, but I don't know if that's precluded. If we're precluded from, if they're precluded from getting compensation from the state programs for that. You may not know that. But.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that we have a staff member that does participate in the Fire Safe Council, and there's been a significant amount of funds. I believe that CAL FIRE has, participated in some of those grants, and that's why we have a large number of burns with CAL FIRE. But I can't answer for individual landowners or farmers. We can check on that, though.
I chair that Fire Safe, Gary. I can say that there is a lot of money, and Dora's right. Most private landowners now work through CAL FIRE or Range Improvement Association, because it becomes a liability issue in today's world. You almost, it would be crazy to try to go on your own like you used to be able to, and so that it helps with the fees and liability. And I didn't realize, so I appreciate Dora telling me that these fees don't apply if you're working with those kinds of organizations. So I don't know that that's even a problem for them. I guess just in principle, all of it, I just look and I think, oh my God, the drought has really put a lot of fuel on the ground. It's a lot of work. And then you open your envelope and get APCD raising your fees. It's just like, oh, but just sharing, just venting a little. So thank you.
Understood.
Thank you. I see Don Ortiz-Legg has a question.
Me again, I have to agree that it concerns me on the agriculture for us. The small farmers, the family farmers, and the fact is that even if it's whatever the agriculture aspect is, you know, small or bigger or large. I mean, I think Dora, what you had said is that, you know, this isn't really a lot. I'm just wondering, is there a way to exempt the agriculture piece on this if it's not like it's going to break the bank and it's not an enormous impact? I'm concerned about the agriculturists at this point as well. So that's all. I'm just wondering.
I have a question for you, Director Ortiz-Lake.
Yeah.
Which part are you talking about? The raising of the regular ag burn fees from $50 to $100 versus the prescribed burning fees for the larger sources. We don't see many of the other burns other than the typical $100, and that's for an entire year of burning.
Okay.
They're not paying for nearly the cost of the programs, and it is an economic benefit for them to be able to burn the material, and we need to run the program. So
okay.
Well,
yeah, I just wanted some clarification on that, if there was any way, but I appreciate that it's not as impactful perhaps, but I do think that right now for the agriculturists, every piece is, you know, adding up, as Supervisor Arnold said, but
yeah.
You know,
Without any significant change to our forecasted budget revenue or proposed budget, we could either pass this and I can come back with some other measure for the larger burns, or we can just keep the larger burns the same as they are and put that as a direction from this board to maintain the current fees for more than 10 acres and up, and we could modify the language fairly easily at this point.
well,
Okay. Are you continue?
I would say that would, you know, if there's a movement on the board to be able to do that, I would be happy to hear some little take on that.
So I would suggest directing, approving, somebody make a motion to, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I'm listening.
To just maintain the same current fees for agriculture and prescribed burn permits at their current level for 10 acres or more.
I would like to make that motion to maintain the levels for prescribed burn, for maintain ag prescribed burn levels as they exist.
And that's for 10
To
acres.
be clear, that would be to approve the resolution as presented. Approve the resolution with revisions to District Rule 302 as modified by Supervisor Ortiz-Lake.
We may need to take public comment before we take a motion on the Rule 302.
Thank you. I'm just clarifying that.
Okay.
And I would ask that you, for 10 acres or more, for burns or 10 acres or more, for the more than $100 permits. Otherwise, we might have to change our budget.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so we have that straight. I would like now, I don't see any other questions at this point in time. So if we could now take public comment, and then we can come back to any discussion or motion, please.
Perfect. Give me 1 second. We do have at least one member of the public that wishes to speak. So let me switch presentations.
Thank you.
We can close that. There we go. Okay. And I only have one member of the public that wishes to speak. It's M. Brown. You may unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Mike Brown representing CoLab. In fact, both CoLabs, the one in SLO County, the one in Santa Barbara County, because we have overlapping memberships that are impacted by your rules. You should reject these increases out of hand. I don't know what all the talk about 6% is. A bunch of them are 14.5, 14.7. You have some new ones. Your job as the elected officials is to not simply roll over and play dead every time your staff proposes the easy way out on something like this. In fact, you should actually reject this and spend time examining how the fees are actually working in the field. So for example, gasoline nozzles, how many of them are there? How many people are involved in that? How long does it take? What does that look like? And then sample others so you really understand the amount of work and the cost that goes into this rather than just skimming the surface of the pond here. The bigger issue here is some of the Board of Supervisors members and some of you on city councils, you know, back when Phillips was, the board rejected the expansion of the fuel loading facility. That in turn, the knock-on effect was then Phillips deciding the plant wasn't viable and then determining to close it. So now you want to lay the burden of your bad decision in the past, and the cities aren't exempt. It wasn't in their zoning, but a number of the cities, and you know this, were all clamoring with the leftist loons about closing the plant and not allowing tank cars and so forth. So now it comes around and the chickens come home to roost, and you want to put the burden on the businesses for your bad policy, you know, in so many ways. And so you need to reject this. You need to make your agency smaller to fit the market as you destroy agriculture, as you destroy the fossil fuel industry, as you destroy the dunes riding, and so many other things. You're not going to have the money. And in the end, if we have a big recession or depression as a result of these policies amplified up to the national level, you're really going to be in a problem. So I would be courageous, reject this, and demand accountability and do your job. Find out what's going on inside. Thank you very much, and I'm available for questions.
Okay. Next public speaker is Jared McLeod. Jared, you may unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, Jared McLeod, Friends of Oceano Dunes. I heard Mr. Hammond mention the proposing to possibly shrink services to reduce expenses due to the limiting funding available for this SLO APCD. And I heard Mr. Willie mention being a fiscal conservative, and I agree with the majority of the comments from previous speaker, Mr. Brown. In light of being a fiscal conservative and taking fiduciary responsibility for taxpayer funding and state parks' money, the APCD has wasted $22 million in the failed stipulated order of abatement on frivolous mitigation projects, which, as previous comments and APCD board members have noted, 40 violations this year. Clearly, the dust mitigation projects have not worked. And here we have APCO Willie talking about proposing to extend the stipulated order of abatement to 2026 and beyond. Again, in light of being fiscally conservative here, and a fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers, it appears to me is that the APCD and APCO is frivolously wasting taxpayer funding, state parks funding, as well as OHV trust fund money chasing a wild goose. Thank you.
Okay. I do not have any other members of the public that wish to speak.
Okay, well, thank you very kindly. So we'll just bring this back to the board for any closing comments, please.
Ms. Ortiz has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I've got to get to that, getting to that screen. I'm doing this on my phone, so please bear with me. Yes, please. Ms. Ortiz-Legg,
Thank you so much. I would just like to make a motion to approve the resolution adopting the proposed revisions to District Rule 302 with the exclusion of the agriculture prescribed burns over 10 acres. Did I get that right? In the fee schedule.
Board Member Paulding, I will second that motion. I'd like to make some comments under discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and I do see your hand up. Mr. Paulding, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to remind this board, we have some new board members or alternates and some folks who had missed past meetings that we did have at least 2 or 3 meetings of our fiscal ad hoc subcommittee, which was comprised of board member Hammond, Arnold, myself, and Mayor Heading out of Morro Bay. I don't believe Supervisor Arnold was able to attend those meetings, but everybody else did agree to this staff recommendation, including the 6% increase. We did place heavy reliance on the fact that when you look at that chart that we were showed at an earlier hearing, every surrounding agency has increased to adjust for the cost of inflation over time. Their CPI or in accordance with a CPI adjustment. We haven't done that for many, many years. We're having to play catch up. This is an unfortunate position to be in, but we tried to take a diversified approach as to how we could do this in a fiscally responsible way, meeting the goal of, or attempting to achieve the goal of 95% cost recovery. We've seen the staff cutbacks. That was the first, order of magnitude to ensure that we're right-sizing the organization. We chose not to approach this utilizing the per capita fee option that Director Wiley spoke to earlier, which would actually place the burden on each of the jurisdictions to help contribute to this. So we chose, again, a process of looking at the fees and staff cutbacks. I will just say that I think that this is a fiscally responsible approach. The reality is that there are some that maybe disagree with the mission or the need for this organization, but our primary mandate is to protect public health from the adverse effects of air pollution, and that's what we're doing. So it's an important role that we play, and I support the motion as modified for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ortiz-Legg, I see your hand is up. Did you have another comment? Oh, it's gone. Okay, very good. So then I don't see any other hands raised. So we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please, or a vote, please?
Yep, and just to clarify, the motion is to adopt the resolution for approving Rule 302 as proposed, but with the modifications to keep agricultural and prescribed burning for greater than 10 acres or more than 100 tons the same. And yes, greater. Okay. Ms. Arnold.
No, but Dawn, I do appreciate that little adjustment that you're making.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Hammond.
No, as proposed, I can't support. Thank you.
Ms. Marks.
Yes.
Ms. Ford.
Yes.
Ms. Bright.
Yes.
Mr. Woggy.
Yes.
Mr. Paulding.
Yes.
Ms. Ortiz-Legg.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-2.
Thank you. All right, then. I appreciate all the hard work on that. We are now coming to our last item of board business, C2, hearing to adopt the district's fiscal year 22-23 final budget. And I believe that would be Kevin Kazuka.
That'll be myself.
Well, that's you.
Yeah. Kevin did the work. I get to take the credit as usual, right? So I could take a beating and a credit both at the same time.
There you go.
This is the second of our 2 required budget hearings. The first occurred on May 18th. Our process allows for open public input. As published notice were published on April 15th. We mailed out notices to all our permit holders and stakeholders. And the budget summary was placed in 6 public libraries at our office and made available on our website. During the last hearing, we didn't receive any specific board direction or public comments to change the budget as presented in May for the purpose of this hearing today. in the adoption of the final budget. Like I said before, we don't need to change the budget numbers with the adjustments to the ag burn fees that we have in there. It's within the band of probability that it won't affect our budget, so we don't have to change that at this point. It'll just be the same as we presented before, since we haven't received any comments. Next slide. So our approach is to continue implementing cost-cutting measures and revenue enhancements where we can find them with your grant programs that we administer, taking the funds and putting them in reserves when we can. Like I mentioned before during the fee adoption hearing, we've cut staff even though we were placing money into the reserves to tighten up this district since I've been involved. We're down 2.5 positions from that point. So since that point in 2018, when I took over the budgeting potential portion being director. So one of those positions was just cut from this year's budget. Previously, we had a position and a half removed. So we have made measures to cut costs. We were building reserves to help ease and spread the pain of our permit program changes. And I think staff has done a great job of being good stewards of the public's money. Next slide. So, this is just typical of our expenditures. Most of it is salary since we're a service organization. That hasn't changed since your last meeting. Next slide, you can see that our service program expenses, half of it is engineering and compliance, which is our permitting and inspection and complaint programs. Next slide. So under this year's budget process and what we've committed to focus on outside our normal duties are the Oceano Dunes Mitigation Program and our stipulated order of abatement process. The long-term fiscal plan adopted following that was adopted in November 2021. We're going to be conducting recruitments for 5 hearing board positions. That includes alternates and regular positions this year. So it's a big year for that. And going after the state's cap and trade grant programs for our on-road vehicles and farm equipment. We've been very successful in getting equal shares of the funding for these tractor replacement projects. So the San Joaquin Valley doesn't gobble it all up. There's quite a bit of money available out there, and we're making sure that our farmers and ranchers and community members receive equal benefit from other parts of the state. One of those issues is assisting chartered boats and fishing vessels for obtaining grants, and we've got numerous ones in the program right now. Assisting with CAL FIRE on the prescribed burning to manage air quality impacts, fire danger, and public health. We spend a lot of our engineering and compliance time on that program. It's very important that we reduce our fuel loads and do it in a manner that can reduce air quality impacts, knowing that wildfire usually occur in times when the air is not moving very well and not dispersing. So it's really important to get that fuels down and reduce wildfires and do so in real-time collaboration with CAL FIRE and other agencies. We're going to manage our staff retirements. We are vastly approaching. We're right about the point where half of our staff has been here less than 5 years. That'll occur in the fall. So we've seen this rapid changeover, like every other organization, of longtime staff. So we're becoming a very younger and modern air district at this point in time. We're going to continue promoting our voluntary Don't Like Tonight program. Last winter, we hardly saw any conditions of inversion as the winter had winds as well, that we normally would see these inversion patterns and get the media out there to ask people if they not to burn their wood burning devices if they don't have to. Like I said before, the weather this year, we even had significant winds in January, February, March. It's really been a crazy wind year, so we didn't see, I don't know if we issued any voluntary don't light tonight advisories last year, but in years past, we may have had 20 or so events. Maybe we had a handful this year. I can't recall any that we issued. So we're going to continue our public outreach campaigns to support our public health needs and get out there communities and wildfire smoke safe centers and things like that. We're looking into expanding into those areas where we can help promote having some clean air centers. As state monies become available for that, we're going to be there to try to help administer those. And like I mentioned before in my APCO's report, we're going to continue to assist local cities and counties in complying with the state GHG requirements. They're very complex. This district doesn't have any requirements specifically. We're there to help our land use agencies get through their development projects without running afoul to the CEQA requirements to ensure that they're not violating the state greenhouse gas requirements. So continue to focus, our planning division continues to focus on that. Continue to work with ARB and CARB on the pollution transport impacts that hit SLO County. So we're seeing that go down over time. So we're happy with that. As the San Joaquin Valley cleans up their air quality, we receive a benefit of that not impacting our eastern county. And finally, we're working with our state and regional partners to ensure that land use and transportation strategies are implemented fairly. Next slide. Notable revenues, we've had a fund balance consistently in that neighborhood of 1.6 million for, between 1.1 million and 1.6 million. Construction permit fees, we think that may go up 30,000, although that's in the wash. Not a huge impact. Permit renewal fees are set to decrease overall by 388,000. And that's with the loss of the refinery this year. That will go down as we implement the slow increases in permit fees from the through two revision that we just passed. Ag permit revenues. Like I said, most of the ag burns are the typically small ones that would be now the $100 fee, and that's that ag permit revenue would now be probably more like 28,000 or something like that, backing out the larger burns that your board chose not to adopt. State aid is scheduled to decrease 431,000. That number will be adjusted downward as we realize grant revenue that it's not for sure coming in, administrating these grants. They've been consistently coming in, so that number will change, and any money that's more than that, if the decrease as we expect to be a lot less than that, that money will go towards reserves and helping meter out our permit fee revenue changes over the course of the next 5 to 10 years as we slowly adjust it to equilibrium. Federal aid will be increasing 22,000, and that's just different additional monies we're getting to change out some data loggers at our monitoring stations to modernize them and help reduce the cost of running the stations. And then, of course, the restructuring of the fee rule that we just passed. Next slide. This is just a sample of what the revenues are projected. They're pretty much as expected. We pull in more because we realize grant programs during the year that we can't count on getting. So you'll see that the estimated revenues are more than the previous budget, and that was 300,000, and that money went towards reserves and special projects that your board had adopted before. Here again, the source of revenues. The permit fees are roughly a third. The unexpended expenditures that are carried on to new years are in there as well. Deferred projects that we have ongoing. DMV fees, that's 20%. Property taxes are 8%. And then state and federal aid through grant programs make up 6%. That number will likely go up, as I explained before, that when we actually secure the grants and the administration fees, that revenue source will go up. And that's typically what we put into reserves. The next slide is an example of our, it is a showing of our reserves and how they're very healthy at 50% of our budget, with a board goal of having a 20% reserve on hand. We're very well set up to meter in the changes to our permit program fees over time to keep them reasonable and not go with the 15% that is allowed by state law, doing the 6% and CPI. And this has allowed us to do that. This is just an example, the next slide, of total reserves and designations. As you can see that over the past number of years, over the past 4 years, we've managed to increase our reserves, and that's through the state's grant program funding mechanism, our admin fees, and we've done so with lesser staff. And so we built our reserves up to a level, about $750,000 over the last 4 years, and that'll allow us to maintain lower cost of our permit program and metering in over time. Next slide. So with that, I recommend that the board adopt the budget as proposed. The permit fee revisions won't amount to needing to any adjustments, and to approve the attached budget resolution request to transfer a little bit of interest earned in mitigation funds into operations to partially reimburse for admin fees. It's a small amount, but it's in your package. And there's, like I said, there's no change to the budget from what we presented in May. And next slide, and I'm done. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now, I do know that Ms. Arnold had a follow-up question, I believe, from the feed from the APCO report, I believe.
Thank you, Karen. My follow-up was just where in the budget was our funding of the hearing board, and kind of going back over it, I could pick out little spots. So it looks like it's scattered a little bit, but I think I was able to answer it myself, just rereading the portions of the staff report.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Thank you for asking, though.
Certainly. Mr. Hammond has the question.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, Gary, again, I've always been impressed with APCD's use of taxpayer funds, again, with the budget and always on the lean side of such. But, I hope we understand where I came from on the fees, because again, it comes back to living with our means. Was there anything now that, we're going to be losing Mesa revenue that we have actually cut out of our budget? I know you've dropped some people. Are there any programs that we're basically putting on the shelf for a while until we can get back up to full speed, so to speak, that we can point a finger to? Other than reducing the senior staff position, since we are primarily focused on service side of it, and that's our budget, there are not any programs that we have proposed in the budget that would result in any significant savings. So they're really, we went over this with a fine-tooth comb, trying to come up with a plan over a number of years. And when you try to run a lean organization and you've been reducing staff, it's we're as lean as any air district out there. So yeah, I know that's why, like I said, I made that comment because I know that for sure that we are very clean and lean. But like I said, we got to live within our means, and there's always issues and organizations can only do so much with what they have to work with. And that's what my question was, is that, that we've cut actually the budget 14% now from this previous year. That's impressive, and still putting out, services to the public. So I was just questioning though, was there any programs that are actually being put on the shelf? And apparently not. We're still doing everything that we did before, just with less money, sounds like.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, we don't, we reduced the staffing levels for these programs and tried to, streamline our involvement in a lot of things. And that's how we've managed to do so, backing out and trying to train other stakeholders to take over.
Very good. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Ms. Arnold, did you have another question?
Yeah, I did, Karen. When we're looking at this big picture, we lost a lot of revenue from one source, being the refinery. But Gary, is the decommissioning or that's all kind of up in the air, what's going on with Diablo, but do we have a lot of work out there, and would we continue to have work with the decommissioning, which would take a long time? Should that actually start? In other words, you see where I'm going with this.
Yes.
We have another big one-time hit, depending on what happens to Diablo.
Fortunately or unfortunately, they're less than 1/10 of the revenue that the refinery has. So it will be an impact. We've addressed that in our planning, and also have received funds to help offset that. And near term, there's not going to be a very big effect, probably for 10 years, on what on their getting the place into a spot where they don't need the permits that we run for them. And additionally, there'll be other permits involved in decommissioning as well to augment that $60,000 a year or so that they pay in fees. It will take some time for that to whittle down to nothing, and maybe not in my lifetime, probably.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions from this board. So have we public comment?
Let's see if we have any members of the public that wish to speak on the budget. I do not see any members of the public with their hand raised.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Then I will bring it back to this board for comments and a motion. Oh, Ms. Marks, I see your hand, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm impressed that this budget represents a 14% reduction from the current year's approved budget. And I would like to move the staff recommendation.
Hammond seconds.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. May we have roll call vote, please?
Yes. Ms. Arnold.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Ms. Ortiz-Legg.
Yes.
Ms. Ford.
Yes.
Mr. Paulding.
Yes.
Ms. Bright.
Yes.
Mr. Woggy.
Yes.
Mr. Hammond.
Aye.
Ms. Marks.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous.
Very good. Thank you very much. I know that we all do appreciate how much time and effort staff put into getting us to this point. So we have our last item is board member items. Have we anyone wish to make any comments there? Okay, well, seeing none then, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
the good
Karen. Great
questions
job.
and comments.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for having you join us, Jen.
It was great. I enjoyed it. Thank you.